In 1986, prehistorians outside of Chengdu, the capital of China's Sichuan province, found the ninth wonder of the world, an astonishing find that has revised the early records of China. They unearthed two burial pits of broken bronze figures, elephant tusks, and jade dating back to 1200 BC. These riches of the mysterious Sangxindui culture were created in style previously unheard of in ancient Chinese civilization. The bronze pieces were particularly striking, unveiling an advanced culture with extraordinary technical abilities to cast 2.5-meter-high, 8-foot bronze statues unlike anything else that survived in the world at that time. Archaeologists consider the treasures to be anomalies, but the big enigma is why this lost civilization voluntarily destroyed its culture almost 3,000 years ago before bequeathing the walled city of Sangxindui by the Minjiang River. The Sangxindui culture, which lasted only 350 years, didn't give written records or human remains as traces of evidence. Speculation as to why this culture disappeared spanned from war to a flood to an earthquake that may have altered the course of the city's river. Several bizarre clays and carved stone statues of androgynous obese figures and obese women have been reclaimed from Hagar Kim. Two stone altars imply ancient rites were once enacted here. The limestone structure has stood for millennia. However, modern environmental conditions are initiating a rapid decay of the structure, which is now protected under tents. For a little over 1,000 years, Malta's temple culture covered their small island with over 30 stone temple structures in designed complexes. This Neolithic culture developed in an isolated pocket. The more it advanced it became, the more extreme it acted, ignoring all influences from the outside world. The temples contained rituals and burial sites along with hundreds of highly unusual statues. How this advanced culture developed is a puzzle. So is its sudden abandonment and complete disappearance. The temple culture of Malta was definitely not wiped out by famine, invasion, or disease. Sometime around 2900 BC, they disappeared. We are left without any writings to reconstruct their past. Isotopic results and analysis of individuals revealed that they consumed mostly meat and vegetables. Bizarrely for an island people, they had little seafood in their diet. Some speculate that rapid changes ended the era of the Maltese temple people, though the latest research proves they were vastly related to Scotland and Irish Neolithic people. In the epic of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the Hittite nation was at the peak of its power. When the mighty city of Troy was attacked by King Agamemnon of the Greeks, Hattusa, the center of the Hittite Empire, was a vigorous metropolis thriving with trade and pilgrims from distant lands. Hattusa was populated by the indigenous Hatti people as early as 2350 BC. Once the Hatti people were crushed, King Hatsuli of the Hittites reconstructed the city and constituted it the empire's main city in 1700 BC. Over the ages, these new rulers had numerous encounters with neighboring peoples like the Mitannians, the Assyrians, and the Egyptians. Around 1274 BC, at the legendary Battle of Kadesh, the armies of King Muwatalli II and Pharaoh Ramses II finished their fight in a stalemate. A peace agreement was then written on a clay tablet, resulting in harmony between the two powers. This time of rest lasted until the demise of the Hittite Empire. Near the end of the 12th century BC, the Phrygians attacked the capital city and torched it to oblivion. Only at some point among the 7th and 9th centuries AD, somebody renovated and reconstructed the sites. But Hattusa will never more bear witness to the grandeur it once had under the Hittites. Although the name they called themselves was Haltam, the name Elam derives from the Hebraic translation of the word. The Elamite civilization consisted essentially of land inside present-day Iran, along with a little portion of Iraq. One of the earliest cultures, it was established sometime around 3000 BC and is by far the oldest in all of Iran. Located along the borders of Sumer and Akkad, the land of Elam was comparable to its neighbors, although its language was altogether different. Although they endured as an independent nation for at least a millennium, if not longer, very little is understood about them because Elamite authors were not bothered with documenting their mythology, writing, or any scientific progressions. The writing was mostly viewed as a way to acknowledge the king or perform executive duties. Due to this reality, they made a rather pitiful impact on the evolution of future civilizations, principally when correlated to the Egyptians and Sumerians. India is gifted with many bewildering and awe-inspiring temples. Of all the temple structures in India, the temple at Lapakshi is conceivably the most perplexing. The ceremonial structure, which was built during the 16th century, has 70 normal columns and one otherworldly pillar. The spectacular pillar does not touch the ground, but instead dangles from the ceiling. It's very common for local guides to entertain tourists skirting twigs or newspaper under this strange pillar. The Lapakshi temple was constructed by two brothers, Virana and Virapana, in 1583, and it's positioned in the Anandpur district of southern Andhra Pradesh. The temple's suspended pillar is a tribute to the architectural genius of ancient and medieval India's temple builder. For centuries, many specialists tried to unravel the secret of Lapakshi's hanging pillar. The most distinguished was a British engineer from the colonial period. In the process of revealing the secret of the famed pillar, he accidentally dislodged it from its original location. Thankfully, no destruction was done, but the engineers failed. To this day, even with the exceptional engineering expertise and modern equipment, scientists have not yet found the code of the pillar's gravity-defying support. Over the great timeline of history, the Khmer Empire is one of the more recent enigmas to take place. The Khmer realm existed from AD 802 to 1432 in Southeast Asia, traversing the modern-day countries of Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and was hybridized culture of Buddhists and Hindus that evolved through centuries of battle. The Khmer Empire developed some of the most extraordinary temples and masterpieces in Southeast Asia today, many of which are in near-perfect status. The Khmer Empire declined like all great civilizations. Some have noted that the movement of the Thai people may have slowly overtaken the Khmer people, much like the Germanic hordes gradually infiltrated the western half of the Roman Empire across time. Still others have shown that possible changes in weather conditions that remodeled their access to rainwater caused mass emigration. Speculations run the full range as to why they fell, but no one really understands for sure. Also identified as the Indus Valley Civilization, the Harappans were a society of people who existed in parts of present-day Pakistan and India. Gifted with the belief that outlying cities in advance would be a good idea, their metropolitan areas were second to none. Regrettably, due to what scientists believe in being a massive, centuries-long drought, their society slowly diminished, never to rise again. This is currently nothing more than a hypothesis, but it helps demonstrate other cultural drops in the area as well. Originating around 2500 BC, the Harappans also improved their own language, a dialogue with nearly 500 different characters, which has not been entirely solved even today. Their most outstanding artifacts are seals, usually formed of soapstone, which represent various animals and mythical creatures. Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro are the two most extensive Harappan sites, with the former designated as a UNESCO heritage site. When it failed, the ruins of Harappan civilization presented a template for the numerous other cultures which sprang up after it. The flower of life was recognized in ancient times. Everything in the universe comes out of this single flower of life pattern. The geometric Metatron cube forms the flower of life. This, in turn, forms the 5 platonic solids of the tetrahedron, the hexahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the icosahedron. These platonic solids make up the whole universe. Every single element in the periodic table of elements has a geometric relationship to one of the 5 platonic solids. Therefore, everything that modern science knows about the periodic table of elements, and thus reality, is related to the platonic solids, which itself comes from the Metatron cube, which in turn comes from the fruit of life, which comes from the flower of life. The Far East wonder of the ancient world has an unknown origin. The 24 caves uncovered is an unfathomable mystery. No historical evidence or any records of the excavations of the almost 1,000,000 cubic meters of stone exists. The carving of the caves was done in such a way that it left a typical pattern throughout the caves, which many researchers believe to be intentionally characteristic. The patterns reflect those found on pottery between 500 and 800 BC. Stone carvings and stone pillars are now open to public viewing in the cave. There's archaeoastronomy research now showing that 7 of the caves have a specific pattern that precisely matches the 7 stars of the Big Dipper constellation. The Barabar caves have the oldest rock-cut temples in the whole of India. Their construction is dated to around the 3rd century BC. The caves are so old that specialists believe them to be the legendary Gorthgiri that are mentioned in the sacred Hindu scriptures. The temples came to the attention of Westerners in 1868 through a cunning description by Alexander Cunningham. According to legend, King Ashoka bestowed the Barabar caves to Ajavikasek, who were equivalents of worshippers of the Buddha. Barabar Cliff is 200 meters, 656 feet long, and accommodates 4 caves. The polish and symmetry of the caves reveal mysterious standards in masonry. The unique construction produces an altered echo that lasts several seconds. Specialists believe that the chambers were polished to specific points to accomplish this effect. 3 of the caves contain 2 chambers. The first is more comprehensive and is believed to have been a meeting space. The second one is smaller and is believed to have served as an intimate sanctum. The Neolithic temple of Hagar Kim hints at the bizarre ancient Maltese fertility powerhouse. First unearthed in 1839, the temple complex contains a dominant central structure and 2 outlying buildings. A series of parabolic-shaped rooms, which experts call apses, give the site layout structure. During the summer alignment solstice, the sun's rays penetrate the temple sanctuary through a specially designed elliptical hole hewn into a particular apse to illuminate the lower stones. Combined with the barrage of fertility statues found here, archaeologists speculate that Hagar Kim was a temple complex of ancient reproductive rites. The ancient temple was heavily active between the era of 3600 and 3200 BC. There are many unusual artifacts of the Bronze Age, but the most awe-inspiring are 4 golden hats, or the golden cones. They range in various heights from 30 centimeters, 12 inches, to nearly 1 meter, 40 inches. The cone-shaped hats are made of almost 90% gold and are adorned with extremely intricate concentric circles or symbols. The oldest known artifact is the Berlin cone, which was assembled around 1300 BC and found in 1835. It's massed in 1,739 sun and moon symbols, placing it at the boundaries of metalworking technology of its time. Among the recommended uses for the cones have been hats for suits of armor, ritual vases, accessories for a place of worship, and even hats for wizards or priest astronomers. A modern analysis of the decorations proposes that the cones perfectly portray solar and lunar cycles thought first observed by astronomer Meton of Athens in the 5th century BC, indicating Proto-Celtic cultures were centuries ahead of their time. Nadra Temple is located at Malta's isolated and barren southern coast. The temple complex dates back to 3600 BC. The most striking element of the site is the attention that ancient architects paid to astronomical observations. Architects sought to harmonize the location of the ancient site with celestial activity. The entrance to the South Temple is adorned with large stone bricks which possess hundreds of drilled depressions. The doorway and the adorned blocks mark the equinoxes and the solstices with precision accuracy. In 2000, mobs and vandals toppled roughly 60 megalithic blocks from the Menadra Temple complex, which the authorities did nothing to protect. In 2009, authorities covered the ancient site with Teflon-coated tents. The tent covering protects the ancient site from the volatile weather and salt air, which regularly degrades the rock construction. The Emerald Tablet is by far the most perplexing ancient X-file we have because, unlike many others, it does not exist anymore. We don't know who wrote it, its bizarre origins, or its location. We don't even know precisely what it looked like. We do know that the first documented naming of the Emerald Tablet dates to an old Arabic manuscript sometime around the 6th or 8th centuries. The earliest Arabic interpretations assert that the original writing was in ancient Syriac. The first Latin interpretation of the text emerged in the 12th century, and various other translations have been produced since then. The most famous interpreter is undoubtedly Sir Isaac Newton, who became obsessed with the tablet in a personal quest. The script is the most significant document in the field of alchemy. It is revered by alchemists because it depicts so much information regarding the Philosopher's Stone. This was a substance able to mutate base metals into gold. Although holding such valuable knowledge, nobody has ever successfully used the Emerald Tablet to complete that alchemical feat. A great deal of what we understand about the small city-state of Cacaxtla in Mexico originates from its colorful, complex murals. Over 1,000 years ago, Cacaxtla began in a modest way, with temples, palaces, and some small pyramids. But scientists believe that it never became as influential as Teotihuacan or the Mayan civilization. In the 1940s, a Spanish antiquarian first examined the site, but it took looters excavating a tunnel into the city's main construction in the 1970s to revitalize interest in Cacaxtla. After stumbling upon a complex mural of a birdman, the thieves announced their find to a priest, who called Mexican officials. The Olmeca Xiaclanca people lived in Cacaxtla as fighters and meticulous artisans. Their community appears to have been separated into distinct social strata, but little else is identified about them. Their luxurious murals depict colorful displays of battle, trade, and worship. The battle mural is one of the most extraordinary at 2 meters, or 6 feet tall, by 20 meters, or 60 feet wide. It shows an offensive exhibition of armed jaguar warriors commanding over defenseless bird warriors. At first, critics believed that Mayan artists traveled to Cacaxtla to create the representation. But there are so many distinctive styles in some of the compositions that it seems more plausible that several artists performed on the murals together. To look at the scenes portrayed in the murals, Cacaxtla would seem to have been a powerful army, a vigorous economy, and an advanced culture. But at least one art history teacher, Claudia Brittenham, thinks the depiction represents the people of Cacaxtla as they yearned to be, rather than as they truly existed. We seldom have a disturbing habit of thinking of art as though it's somehow separate from life, as it's embellishing and not a vital thing, she said. In the pre-modern world, that's not accurate. All art is administrative, and the art can be an active advocate in creating a sense of fellowship. The Anasazi Society of the North American Southwest left behind numerous constructions and artifacts for us to recover before they ultimately passed. Maybe it was the harsh climate of the southwestern heartland or the changing of that environment which made circumstances unlivable, namely where access to water is involved. But this is one group of people who also vanished. Massive buildings built onto the cliffsides were left entirely abandoned and were discovered in relatively pristine condition. These dwelling edifices were excellent for fending off intruders, as they were often many stories high with portholes for the entrance via ladders. When conflict would break out, the Anasazi could ascend into their buildings, raise the ladders, and be many stories above the invading hordes, and could shoot down on their enemies with privilege. Many Native American societies, as well as some academics, claim that the Anasazi never really vanished. They just struck the critical mass of size that a community can become before it unavoidably breaks off into smaller parties and becomes new societies of people, much like ancient Rome. They think that individual tribes today which survive are the immediate descendants of the Anasazi culture. The Lenin Book of Zagreb is the most exceptional text written in the old language of Etruscan. The writing had a tremendous impact on the world since it profoundly influenced Latin. Nowadays, it's frequently lost to the annals of history. Very few ancient documents feature Etruscan. For this reason, large pieces of the Liber Lenetis are still not translated to this day. An understanding of the book is that it appears to be a ritual calendar, although it was initially thought to feature funeral rituals. It's extraordinary that the Liber Lentuis endured all this time despite being from the 3rd century BC. It's remarkably uncommon for linen books to last that long, but the Liber Lentuis is no ordinary book. It remained intact because it was repurposed. The book was split into pieces and utilized by the ancient Egyptians to wrap a mummy. This means that the Liber Lentuis was preserved in a high-grade condition, but it went ignored for an extended period. Even when it was discovered, most people who saw it simply assumed that the text was Egyptian. The Olmecs were the primary Mesoamerican civilization, and their knowledge was as rich as it was bizarre and awesome. They left us numerous standing constructions and sculptures which exist today, and their influence lasted from 1200 to 400 BC, with a community based on sacred spiritual disciplines for which they developed pyramid-like temples. Similar to the Polynesian Society of Easter Island, they also fashioned massive stone heads, some of them as tall as 3 meters, 10 feet, and weighing 8 tons. So much of this society that lived long ago has been forgotten, and we don't even actually comprehend what they described themselves as, or much about their literature. Olmec is a title the Aztecs held for them centuries after their departure, which transposes roughly to rubber people. Even more intriguing is the point that not a single shred of anyone who lived there survives, not even the people. But we do have artifacts. They retreated from the world stage sometime around 400 BC. Some have insinuated that the idiotically humid Mesoamerican climate disintegrated their remains away. But as for the people, the literature, and the society outside of their history and artifacts, we know next to zero, particularly not why they disappeared. The ancient culture of Nabta Playa in the southern section of modern-day Egypt was a Neolithic society that lived in the area from approximately 11,000 to 6,000 years ago and was mostly nomadic, as was typical for that area at the time. The environment of the Nabta Playa basin was one of feast or famine, where periodic shifts produced an abundance of water at some periods during the year, then an entire drought at others. Ultimately, the people settled down and occupied the area as a civilization. The stone circle approximately aligned with the stars in many different ways and became a haven for offerings to the gods. Like those who constructed Stonehenge, the people who lived there ultimately descended and then completely disappeared. Originating on the Greek island of Crete, the Minoans were an old Bronze Age culture that lived from between 3000 and 1000 BC. Way before the Golden Age of Athens and Alexander the Great. The Minoans were patently a Greek society and the predecessors of the ancient Greece that's most prominent in our history books today. But they were also a tremendous pagan culture, preparing offerings, having many nuanced cults, and holding wild festivals of song and dance. The ancient Egyptians discussed them in hieroglyphics, which suggest that the Minoans unmistakably traveled in the ancient world, and they had high-quality technologies and dramatic arts for the day, but they dwindled and vanished. Speculation has proposed that they were decimated by a volcanic explosion in the Santorini Islands near Crete, which must have devastated the coasts of Crete with waves, ash, and falling stones. Herodotus, the renowned Greek historian, writes that they were taken down by plagues and diseases, but there's really no way to tell, as Herodotus recorded many centuries after the peoples of this island had vanished. Nearly 2,000 years before the Romans sewed their continent-straddling empire together, the Akkadian Empire was in full motion. Stretching from the Mediterranean to the middle of modern-day Iran, it was a hotbed of artistic activity. Carvings and frescoes were so far ahead of their time, they've now been deemed the zenith of ancient artwork. A strong arcane tradition sprang up, leading to the protection of the oldest Semitic dialect known to wisdom. In the middle of all this lay the city of Agade, the source of Akkadian culture and one of the most prominent places in ancient Mesopotamia. It affected events as far away as Babylon and modern-day Oman. Today we have utterly no idea what happened to it. We know it failed, probably, as a result of an invasion, but that's just a guess. We don't even know where it used to be. There are contenders for potential sites, distinctly the mound at Ashan Mizyad, but we've so far discovered nothing to designate the greatest city of the period once occupied where. Until something turns up, Agade's position and destiny will remain a total enigma. In the 12th century, the Mongols released their fury against the medieval kingdom of Georgia. Queen Tamar instructed the building of an underground sanctuary to protect against these marauders. In 1185, the Georgians created an underground fortress embedded in the solid rock of Edishel Mountain. The amazing structure contained 6,000 apartment dwellings with over 13 levels, a throne room, and a huge chapel with an external bell tower. The cave complex of Vardzia was completely self-contained. Crops were raised on irrigated terraces on the outside edges of the mountain. Citizens drew spring water from deep within the structure via tunnels. The Vardzia cave complex was durable enough to withhold the Mongols' fury, but nature was another story. An earthquake decimated nearly 3/4 of the city in 1283. The monastery survived until 1551, when it fell to a Persian attack. Today, 7 Orthodox monks still manage the ancient site. The Dambulla Golden Temple Cave Complex has attracted pilgrims to Sri Lanka's interior for over 22 centuries. With over 80 known caves in the area, most of the statues and unusual paintings are hosted in a section of 5 caves. These cave temples contain over 150 statues of Buddha, 3 statues of Sri Lankan sovereignty, and 4 statues of gods and goddesses. The construction dates to the 3rd century BC. The cave complex is one of the countless ancient caves in Sri Lanka and still functions as a petty monastery. Although the Golden Temple is the best preserved cavern complex on the island, it's not completely original. There were major restorations in 1190 and repeatedly throughout the 18th century. Buddhist paintings cover 2,100 square meters, some 22,600 square feet of wall space. Archaeologists assume ancient Sri Lankans dwelled in the caves long before Buddhism appeared on the island. Individual remains dating back as far as 2,700 years have been unearthed in the region. The Minaret of Jam, located in Afghanistan, is revered by many for its beauty and complexity. The 64 meters, some 210 feet, tower is still in fantastic condition, even though it was built in the 12th or 13th centuries using flaky bricks. The elaborate decorations and engravings are still clearly visible. This alone was enough to get it listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The original date of the minaret's construction makes its purpose also unknown. An inscription denoted when it was built, but it's not fully literate. We only know the towering structure was built by the Ghorid dynasty at its peak. The dynasty ruled over parts of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India. The most interesting theory regarding the Minaret of Jam is that it belonged to the lost city of Firuzkoh. This was also called the Turquoise Mountain. The place was the capital city of the Ghorid dynasty and one of the most remarkable cities in the world. It was subsequently defeated by Ogedei Khan, son of Genghis, and its exact location was forever lost. Perhaps the first center of the world, circa 7400 to 6000 BC, Katahoyuk was an exceptional farming settlement of about 8,000 individuals who lived in rectangular mud brick homes built upon one another like row houses. But there were no streets or roads around any of them. People entered their houses through apertures on the roof. A lot of movement and exercise would have taken place at the rooftop level. And in between assortment of houses were these open expanses where they discarded their rubbish. It's those spaces that are most fruitful for us because they truly kept their houses very clean. Located in central Turkey, Çatalhöyük was found in 1958 by a British antiquarian. But it was 31 years before another archaeologist was authorized to start the excavation. Still, only about 5% of the site has been unearthed. With every new development comes more mysteries. The people of Çatalhöyük established new houses over the old ones, 16 courses in all. But why did they give up their wandering lifestyle to reside there in such huge numbers? They were farmers, but they didn't dwell near their crops. Why not? Where was their produce grown? In appreciation of sculptures and figurines, paintings rich in metaphor have been well conserved on the plaster walls inside the dwellings, which doubled as crypts. People were buried underneath the houses with artwork centered near the burial platforms. Interestingly, people who lived as a family at Çatalhöyük were buried underneath a house were not biologically associated. Archaeologists assume the city, which may represent the origin of civilization, had no leaders or administration, and that men and women were viewed as equals. Geoglyphs are large images engraved or etched on the surface of the earth. The Nazca geoglyphs and lines are probably the most famous geoglyphs we have. Still, only 200 kilometers, some 130 miles from the Nazca Plain, is an even more mysterious geoglyph that baffled every researcher to date. The Paracas candelabra measures about 180 meters, some 600 feet in diameter. Although it's in very close proximity to the Nazca lines, this pictogram was probably not built by the Nazca culture. Ancient pottery found at this site dates to 200 BC, which means that the Paracas people are likely responsible. While we have an inkling to who built the candelabra and a possible when, the question remains, why? Every archaeologist has been baffled so far. Although some attribute an ideological value to the geoglyph, many locals perceive it to be the staff of Viracocha, the local ancient creator god. Many others suggest a more pragmatic purpose. The candelabra geoglyph is carved into a hill. The angle and huge size mean that it can be seen from a vast distance, as far as 22 kilometers, some 14 miles out to sea. Was this a significant landmark for sailors?